Hi, I'm Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy, and this is Toolroom Tuesday. So today is Tuesday, December 4th, 2018, and if you love the trade, if you love working with your hands, if you love the smell of a tool room, then you're in the right place. This is again my Toolroom Tuesday. I'm Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy. During the day, I'm a tool and die maker by trade and a specialty machinist, and by night I am a tool and die advocate, an advocate for manufacturing. So with that being said, before we get started here, I'd like to welcome our sponsor tonight, Industrial Sales and Manufacturing, ismerie.com. Full disclosure, that's where I work. Now you might say, well, big deal, the Tool and Die Guy got a sponsorship from the place he works. You try it. It's not that easy. You know, could be a lot of hurt feelings there, but you know what? ISM has always understood what I'm trying to do there online, and because they are an American manufacturer and have made it through the last 50 years unscathed, they would say maybe a little scathed, but they get it. It's a terrific company. I'm proud to have them as a sponsor. So check them out at ismerie.com. That's the Rakowski family, a staple in the Erie manufacturing community for over a half century. So welcome, ISM. Hope we do you proud here. And let's get started with Toolroom Tuesday. So before we get to the really juicy stuff, because I know what you guys like about the first few programs is my tools, and I've got a nice selection of stuff to look at tonight, but I do want to touch on a few things, and the first thing I want to touch on is last week's comments. And you know, I get a lot of comments and they were all good. Congratulations, you guys really did a good job with the comments. You never know on YouTube, right? Well, this is my favorite one. I did get one funny one. I had mentioned, somebody said, hey, why don't you do Tool and Die Guy t-shirts and hats? And I said, oh, I was kind of worried that I couldn't get them made in America and they'd be a little too expensive to really sell. And I said, I don't want to have Oriental things on my website. And somebody said, wow, Oriental, haven't heard that in a long time. And I got a chuckle out of that because there's so many other words I could have used, but I didn't. I behaved. So this is a good comment. And you can look on that underneath last week's program and see all of the comments, but this is a really good one. This is a motor maker, and he says, fogs are important. They're the keepers of the tribal knowledge. When I started my apprenticeship back in the 90s, I found that some of those old timers wouldn't even talk to me, let alone turn loose their secrets. Well, a year in, I discovered they were just sizing me up. You can call it paying our dues or proving yourself or whatever, but once I showed them that I was there to work, and I was there to work, and I could think through some setups and machining questions that they didn't have to an issue whatsoever after that, of showing me things and helping me out. I understand the attitude now that I'm in my 40s. I've seen so many young guys show up late for work, leave for lunch and not return. Guys turn up 10 minutes late wearing shorts and flip-flops. The fogs, the fine old guys, they have a job to do, and they don't have time for the shenanigans of youth. That's a pretty good line. Why waste your time training a guy who won't make it in 6 months anyway? If you are a young person entering this trade, for the first thing you need to do is show up for work 15 or 20 minutes early, dressed and ready to work. Those old guys will come around. Walk the walk, learn to talk the talk, and once they see you're teachable and worthy of teaching, they will pass on that tribal knowledge. Excellent. I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, when I started my apprenticeship, those guys were polite to me, but they were pretty cool for about 6 months until they got a sense of that, you know, I was earnest and hungry to learn from them and respectful and showed up for work on time. And that's the way that used to work. And that's still, I guess guys like me and this guy kind of believe the same thing. So that's the first part. I wanted to check in with the comments. And the next thing we're going to go to is a quick news snippet, things that are going on in the trade. And the one that caught my eye was an article that I saw in another group that I'm on Facebook. And it was on a magazine called Quality Magazine. And there's a headline that manufacturing is really facing a huge deficit and trying to fill jobs. 2.4 million jobs, they estimate, aren't going to be filled in the upcoming future. And why is that? Well, they did a survey, and they came up with a deal that, this is interesting. One of the main reasons people don't get into manufacturing, or kids right now, is 46% of those surveyed had an unfavorable view of manufacturing. Well, I saw this coming years ago, back in 2003 when I was just finishing up Kerner Tool and Die, and all my work had gone to the Pacific Rim, but I wasn't getting any more phone calls for apprenticeships. I used to get one a week, and I wasn't getting one a month. I was lucky if I got 2 a year. And you know, the word was out on the street, man. I just watched my dad, my uncle, everybody got laid off. Why would I get into manufacturing? So now, you know, that's part of this program, is to talk about it and get people excited about it. That being said, you know, one of the things we do at ISM is give shop tours. We're very involved with the local tech schools. We have an apprenticeship program. I'm the apprenticeship supervisor, and they put me in charge of doing the shop tours, which I was glad to do. And you know, I've got to tell you, I've seen some really bad shop tours, you know, and in my lifetime, not just at ISM, so that's not a slam against them. And I've got 4 steps. If you're going to bring some kids into your plant and give them a tour of the plant, let's get with this little program, okay? And I know you know your shop, but there's a few things that I've discovered work really well. So let me give you a 4-step guide to giving a really, really great shop tour, okay? Number 1, insist on the group being fairly small, and I'm talking about 10 to 12 kids. When I have 10 to 12 kids, they can all gather around me, and they can hear me, and they can engage with me. Once it gets over that, there's stragglers, and they can't hear what I'm saying. You know, shops are loud, so try and get them to give you smaller groups so they can hear you. Number 2, you know, the person giving the tour should be enthusiastic. They should like manufacturing. They should have a passion for it, because that shows through when you're giving the tour, right? The kids understand that, wow, this guy likes what he's doing for a living. If you've got a guy giving the tour that's like, you know, not really into it, and I get that. Not everybody has a big personality. They might be really talented. It's not a slam against anybody, but you want to have somebody fun kind of giving the tour, right? I always pull these kids aside before we even go on the shop floor. I said, you guys need to ask questions today. I know you guys all want to be cool in front of your friends, but you're not cool. You're taking a tour of a shop. You're a nerd, own it, and let's have fun with this. And they always laugh, and we take a great tour. The third thing is know your audience. Third point. You know, if I'm giving a tour to a shop, of the shop, to a bunch of graduate engineer students, I can be more technical. Usually I ask these kids, who's ever been in the shop before? If nobody raises their hands, tells me a lot. I dumb it down. They don't need to know the intricacies of everything we're doing there. So what I do, okay, this is step number 4. Before I do a tour, I go through the plant, and I have my 3 or 4 people that I know can do a good little mini seminar, okay? So I go through some areas. I say, hey, Joe, this guy's coming, I got a tour coming through. Can you make sure this machine's running today? They'll love that. And I go, you know, maybe the robotic welding and QC. I make sure they can play with the CMM machine and beep a few things. They love that. They love that. And then I make sure our robotic feeder for our lathe is working. And that young guy, college graduate with 2 tours in Afghanistan, fun guy, he's got a big personality, he walks into the robot. At the end, you know what happens? They ask a lot of questions, and I get a letter every time from a teacher saying that was the best tour we ever had. So those are the 4 points to giving a good shop tour. If you want people to get interested in manufacturing, you got to make it interesting. That's just my 2 cents on that. And next, we are going to go to, I know you guys really, again, want to see the tools. I want to talk to you guys just a little bit about fogs. And this is called a fog warning. Wow, do you hear that noise? Well, that noise is a fog warning. You know, a few months ago when I discovered the fog thing, effing old guys, I was a little irritated, I will be honest. But then I realized there's a lot of fogs out there, and they kind of all embraced it too. So now we have changed that. We are fine old guys. And what we want to do now with this fog warning is, you know, again, going back to the comments, a lot of people have enjoyed the program, and what they like is the history, and they like that content. Well, I've got a fine old guy named John Shirk, and I did an interview with John just a few nights ago on the phone, and you'll find this interesting. This is a fog warning. John's a fog, and he owns his own gauge repair business in Dayton, Ohio, called Indicare Gauge. Well, he's a personable guy. He started his apprenticeship in 1964, and it's a great story and how we got into the trade. So let's do the fog warning. Let's enjoy a little bit of a history here, and then I'll show you some of my archives, some cool stuff I have here down in the bunker in Erie, PA. We're in the a fog warning now. I'm going to call this section the fog warning. But
Okay.
your story, the few times we've spoken, has just been great. And you've got a beautiful story to tell about your story in tool and die making and where you ended up. But when did you start in the trade? And tell me a little bit about that story, about the day you had to go do something on top of a building is it Dayton? But you had to, they made you do that?
Yeah. Yes, it was at Dayton, Ohio, and I'd gotten a summer job with. Well, actually, I hadn't gotten the job. My dad got me the job with a neighbor for a company called Wayner Roofing and Tinning. They're no longer in business but the first jobs that we did were putting up copper spouting and on expensive homes, and we would solder it together and all that good stuff. But then the one day, George, the guy I was working for, he said, we're going to downtown Dayton. I said, oh, what are we going to do today? And he said, this is going to be fun. And we got down there, and we went to right at the corner of 3rd and Main Street. There was a large building called the Gem City Building.
Is that still there? Is that still there?
No, it's no longer there.
Okay.
But the Gem City Building had a large clock at the top of it that was like a 4-sided clock. And in fact, that clock now is in the Dayton Historical Society. After they tore the building down, they did save the clock. But our job that morning was to ride the freight elevator up to the top, which was about, I want to say it was 11 or 12 stories up in the air, and get out on the roof and then put up ladders on the side of this clock and put what they called pigeon wire around this clock. And,
and John, just give us a year and how old were you?
I was 17 or 18 years old, and this was 1964.
Wow.
And so we went up there, and we put the ladder up, and I got about 4 steps up on the ladder, and I said, George, I can't do this. And he said, what do you mean you can't do this? I says, I'm not gonna make a living doing this because me and heights don't agree.
Even at that age.
Yep. So at that point, I just basically told him that I quit. So I got back on the freight elevator. Well, my mind was running right then, and I'm thinking as I'm going down the freight elevator, when I get home tonight, my dad is going to kick my butt because I quit the job that he got for me.
Absolutely.
Well, when I got to the lobby, I was walking out, and like all of the old style buildings, you don't see them anymore, but every building had a little cigar shop.
Mm-hmm.
And they sold cigarettes, cigars, newspapers, candy and such, different sundries. And so I thought, well, I'm going to get a newspaper and see if I can find another job. And I saw an ad for a machinist trainee at a company at that time that was called Dayton Perforators Corporation. And it was about 5 or 6 miles away. And so I went out on the corner, caught the bus, and went over to an area of town that I wasn't even familiar with, and walked into this Dayton Perforators, and and filled out an application, and they hired me on the spot.
Now, did you end up going through an apprenticeship there?
Yes, I went through an apprenticeship. The first apprenticeship I went through was a machinist apprenticeship, and it was basically learning just how to run all the different machines in the shop. And the owner of the company, he could see into the future like nobody's business. I mean, this guy, he was sharp, and he started a school that he called, the name of the school was Profitool Academy.
Wow.
And what this school did was basically, instead of going to like a college or something like that, you would go in the evening to classes at they called it the Little Red Schoolhouse, and it was a little building that he'd bought, and he hired different math teachers from the local high school and things like that, and that's where we learned all of our math and all that.
So you guys weren't doing machining there; you were learning math and geometry and skills like that.
Right. We were learning print reading. I took basic blueprint reading.
Now, did you have to work at his shop to go to that school, or did he take anybody in?
At the beginning, it was just for Dayton Perforators employees, and then it got so popular in the Dayton area, we had apprentices, and we had tool makers, journeyman tool makers that actually came in and taught classes.
And how long did that go for? How many years did that run?
It went until, I want to say, in almost the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah. Eventually, it was in about a 35,000 square foot building, which was right up the street from the new building that Dayton Perforators moved to. And you could actually work at Dayton Perforators and walk to school. I mean, it was like a 3-minute walk from the shop to the school.
So you used to paint his buildings. Is that the same guy?
Same guy.
Tell that story. Tell that story. You were out digging a ditch or cleaning out something.
Well, Dayton Perforators became Dayton Progress Corporation, and to show you how crazy the president of this company was and how cool he was, he held a contest, and at that time we had like 300 employees, something like that, and he had 2 contests at the same time that he ran. One was new name for Dayton Progress and new logo for Dayton Progress. And whoever won got an extra week's vacation that year.
Well, that's a nice deal.
And he kept the name, whatever name they kept, and the logo, and that logo stayed the same until they were sold. I mean, but his name was Bob Gargrave, and he was a great guy.
Was he an older guy when you knew him, like our age now, or how old was he back then?
He was, when I was in my teens, he was probably in his 30s.
Wow.
In his 30s, and
smart guy.
He inherited the business from his father. His father had started the company, but he had the idea when he got out of college. He had learned marketing. That was his major thing, was marketing, and he had learned how important it was to standardize things, to make things standard. So at that time, we were making punches every size imaginable, and he basically said, well, we should be making punches an 1/8 inch diameter, a 1/4 inch diameter, 3/8, half inch, and so he came out with a standardized catalog, and from there it just took off. But getting back to the story, being the apprentice, this was when I was out of my machinist apprenticeship, and I was in my toolmaking apprenticeship. But I was working night shift, and at that time we were building an extension onto the building. Well, when they started digging the footers on this building, they found a underground stream, and they wanted to get the footers poured. Well, they were filling up with water quicker than what they could pour concrete. So they bought a big trash pump and set it out there, and it was my job during the evening. And I don't even know whether the kid on the apprentice on day shift, whether he had to do it during the day shift or not. It was my job to go out and fire that pump up and pump that thing dry. And of course, just being a footer, it was all uneven. So the suction end of the pump, you had to maneuver it to different locations. And I'm down in this tree, and I'm maneuvering this thing around. I saw a shadow. And, it was pitch black, and I looked up there, and here it was Bob Gargrave. It was the president of our company. And he said, "What are you doing down in there?" And I told him, I said, my boss told me I'm supposed to drain this out. He said, "Well, you're doing a fine job, young man." And so I come up out of the hole, and we're walking back, and I'm walking back with him. And I said, I said, I agree with a lot of stuff that you've done here, but I said, something that doesn't make a bit of sense to me is how much money you're wasting on these buildings. And he said, what do you mean wasting money? I said, every building that you've built on this street since I've been here, I said, you have the painters come in and they paint this building, and after they paint the building, you say, "No, I don't like that color," so you have them repaint it again, and you pick out a different color, and then after you see the second color, you say, "Well, I like the first color better," and they go right back to it. And he said, he looked me right square in the eye. I'll never forget this. And he says, I want that first color on the building the whole time. And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" He says, "I also want 3 good coats of paint." And he said, if I tell them to give me 3 coats of paint, they're going to cover it good on the first coat. And he says, and the second coat and the third coat, he says, who knows what they're going to put on there. But they're going to charge me for 3 full coats.
That is a brilliant story. So quickly, just to move along, you ended up in the gauge repair business. We'll talk about that in a minute. So you go through this apprenticeship, and now you've got this very successful gauge repair business. How did you go from tool making to gauge repair?
Well, my first boss when I was going through my tool making apprenticeship, his name was Eddie Vogel. And Eddie Vogel was well known around the city of Dayton because his dad was a high-quality jeweler and watchmaker. And when I say watchmaker, he wasn't a watch repairman. He was a watchmaker. Mm-hmm. He made watches. And Eddie Vogel learned the trade from his dad. And when he got in the tool and die business, he saw all these dial indicators and things, and he said, "Well, this is nothing but a rough version of a clock or a watch." So he started repairing indicators, and in the process, I don't know whether I became his pet boy or what, but he invited me over to his house. He lived in a neighborhood near where I lived, and he showed me initially how to take apart an indicator, put it together, and then after he showed me a couple of them, he said, "Okay, you're on your own." And from there on out, I had to teach myself, and if I ran into a problem, I would come in that Monday and I'd say, "Eddie, I got this one indicator, I just can't figure out how to get it apart or how to adjust the hairspring or something like that." And he'd show me what to do on it, and that's basically how I learned.
So you started your own business in 1986?
I started in '86 while I was still a toolmaker at Dayton Progress. In other words, I worked in the tool room at Dayton Progress and traveled. Basically, we took care of machinery that was in all corners of the world. You know, Japan, Korea, Portugal, places like that. And during that time, I would work in the evening on indicators, but then during the daytime, I would work in the shop.
So fast forward, it's 2018. You've been doing this 32 years. How's business?
Cover that. There's not, you know, I think that the tool and die industry has the same problem that I have.
Absolutely.
But it's good for me. It's good.
I'll bet.
Because I don't have that much competition.
Well, people don't want to send their indicators back to China to get repaired.
Exactly.
So you're busy. So tell us a little bit about your business. What's the name of it, and how do people get a hold of you?
Well, the name of my business is Indicare Gauge Repair, and we have a website. The website is www.indicaregauge.com, and the gauge is spelled G-A-G-E.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I spelled it G-A-G-E is because I never was very good at spelling, and I never could remember whether it was G-U-A-G-E or G-A-U-G-E.
And I don't think anybody still knows. The place I apprenticed at was Anson Tools and Gauges. They were founded in 1945, and they went with the G-A-G-E-S. So not sure if there's a correct or incorrect spelling of that. And I'll make sure I share your information. I can tell everybody that I've sent stuff to John. It comes back flawless, a master. And I really appreciate you taking the time to spend a few minutes with me tonight. So I hope you enjoyed that interview. And John is a terrific guy. And again, his work is impeccable. I've sent some stuff to him, and he's just, he's trained as a tool maker and as a watchmaker. Guy's just really good, calm guy, fun guy. So the information's up here. If you got a gauge that needs to be recalibrated or repaired, you dropped your calipers, send him his way. He's reasonable and he's excellent. I can really attest to that. So please remember John for those repairs. And I'd like to again thank John Shirk for being a part of our first initial fog warning. So to wrap things up, we're going to go into a look at some tools next, and let's see what you think of that. I've got a special effect coming next week, so I'm not going to show you as much as I usually do because I want to use that special effect next week, and we'll take a look at those tools now. So the moment you've been waiting for. Well, we talked about training tonight, and training and apprenticeships to me go hand in hand. So what I thought I would show you tonight to start with is this. And this is my apron from when I was an apprentice. Now it's a white apron, right? And if you can look closely here, they've embroidered, not silkscreened, my name in there, Kerner. And you know what? They gave me 5 of those when I started, and they washed them for me, so I always had a clean white apron. Now let's talk about that for a second. Back then in 1980, the tool makers, mold makers, and their apprentices wore white aprons, and the machinists wore blue aprons, and they didn't get the embroidery either. So they were setting us up to be prima donnas 40 years ago, right? So I have this beautiful apron, and how do you know it's my apprentice apron? Well, here's a picture of me wearing it, and there I am running a Hydrotel, probably around 1981. And don't I look like a happy guy? It was a cool machine, man. And you know what? When I look at that picture and I see that black hair and how damn good looking I was, all I could think of is, boy, have I aged very well. All right, that's enough of that. So, talk about training and apprenticeships. This is this book I keep. It says Anson's on it, and 1980, 1983. And you know, when you want to make somebody feel special about their job, I don't know if people want to make their employees feel special, but when you do, you take care of them. And this was my apprenticeship, and I've kept all the records all these years. Now, last week, I think, I don't know if it's in here, we had a suggestion form. Very cool. But This is the original facilities list from Anson Tools and Gauges. And I've got this apprentice tools list that's available on the toolandieguy.com. It's really cool. But, you know, they took care of us. And when you go through this, this is not my book. This was their book. And this is the book they kept on me that I've kept all these years. And this is my Apprenticeship and Training Council for the state of Pennsylvania, my rates, and my suggestions. My apprentice rates, well, you know, $4 an hour back then. But here's what I want to talk to you a little bit about. What they really did at Anson's, look at this book. I mean, they kept track of all this stuff. What our contract was. I mean, this is when you feel safe when you're training a kid. I felt safe when I went to Anson Tools that I was going to get an amazing apprenticeship, and that's why I went there. That's a great story. You should have seen that day when I interviewed there. There were 7 people in that office. I was sweating so bad. It was embarrassing. So there's the requirements. They made us buy tools every 6 months. They had a list that we had to have. That's my apprentice tools list. And if you didn't have them, you didn't get your raise, because every 6 months we got a raise. So they had to be on order. So there's shop foreman's responsibilities, and it gives you the hours we're supposed to get during our apprenticeship. But wait until you see this. Now this was before computers, believe it or not. There used to be a day and age when we didn't have computers. So this is the list of all the machines and the places I was supposed to go during my apprenticeship. And they hand wrote it in every month, how many hours I had in every hour, in every area of the shop. And it, as you can see, it keeps growing and growing until I hit 8,000 hours. And they put me through drilling and boring, milling machines, pantograph work, the lathe, cylindrical grinder, surface grinder, polishing, EDM, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. These people tracked all 8,000 hours of my apprenticeship. And you know what? I knew every 6 months I would have a raise, and oh my gosh, we have monthly grades. Would you like to see my monthly grades? Let's see here. Bob Westmiller, I think he's still alive. And this is November 10th, 1980. Skill and knowledge, 4 out of 5. Not too shabby. Quality of work, 4. Quality of work is very good though, but they can't give you that 5, can they? Quantity of work should start improving. Of course, they always say that. Dependability, good. Does very good on setups and has no problem interpreting drawings. Well, that's what I teach on my website, right? That's all, I guess it's just been a deal with me with the setups. I love setups. It's the most creative thing I do every day. Cooperation. See, you guys think I'm a dick. Really, I cooperate very well, just not complain as to the type of work assigned. Well, that's before I saw YouTube comments. I complain a lot now. Initiative and effort. 3 should show more initiative. Oh, I hate this guy. I never liked him. You know, so we go through, I got a review every couple months, and that's how you take care of your apprentices and train people. Make sure they know what's going on. Make sure they've got their hours tracked. You feel like you're getting somewhere. I had the best apprenticeship, no doubt. So you saw my apron, you saw that. Back to the apprenticeship. Now, I have a problem with these young boys now not wanting to take notes. And I was a note taker, and I like taking notes because I had good handwriting and because I was trained as a draftsperson. This is my composition book. And these are the notes I took during my apprenticeship. And they are meticulous. It's funny, I was thinking about buying a house there. The first page is my interest rates. But if you go through this thing, it's very involved with trigonometry, as you can see here, and angles, because I did a lot of mold making, of course, ball angles, ball dimensions, different types of, you know, I took meticulous notes. And I took great pride in these notes, and I think you can tell by that. I don't think anybody does this anymore, but there's something about writing stuff down. It goes in your brain. That's what I think. Writing, I use a computer every day, but when you're actually taking the time to print this stuff out, it lodges something in your head. That's my 2 cents on that. So that's one of my books, and then this is another. This is a set of reference stuff I used to keep. different how to grind angled cutters. And this is a cool note. This is my father's. I found this in his toolbox. And he was calculating thread pitch diameters. You can see I was trying to learn the same thing back there. I thought the coolest thing I ever did back then was learning how to measure threads and turn them on a lathe. And I haven't touched a lathe since. Weird. Learning how to use your calculator. We actually had a calculator class at Anthony's. So this is all EDM stuff, injector pins, obtuse angles, whatever. Another really nice piece there. So what are we going to go to next? Well, that's a bit of history. So as always, I want to give you something you can also enjoy and maybe use in your tool shop tomorrow. Many years ago, I went to a wedding, family wedding, and my Uncle Mike was there. My Uncle Mike Bukowski, and that was my mother's brother. I am half Polish. Bukowski is the name on my mother's side, and Kerner is the name on my father's side. So I'm 50-50, German and Polish. Well, my Uncle Mike was a tool maker also on that side of the family at Parker White Metal, the die casting company out in Erie, Pennsylvania, or Fairview, PA. And this is a V-block he gave me. Well, when my Uncle Mike retired, he gave me this little peach basket full of tools. And this is very interesting. This is just a simple V-block. It's got a small V on one side and a larger one on the other side. It was a little simple clamp, right? And I added my own aluminum screw. That's really a nice way to do things, right? Because every time you use a real V-block screw, it just mars up your work. So just put an aluminum screw in there. Anyways, it says Bukowski on it. Not a big deal. I get it. Well, then one of the things that was also included in that little, it said peach basket, I think they used to put apples in them, was this block. And it's 4x4, and on one side it's got a bunch of 3/8/16 holes. I think this is actually the 5/16 18, and this side's 3/8/16. And then what I did was I bolted this old electrode holder on it, and I use this in my vise all the time for little parts that are shafts and things that are like 6 inches long, 8 inches long, and I can stand this up and hang the parts off my vise and drill holes in the end, mill the end, whatever. But this is a really handy setup. I use this thing a lot, the block, and then this is a late addition recently that I put the electrode holder on the end to create my own right angle plate. Well, it comes in really handy. What was really funny the other day, for the first time in 40 years, I used both of Uncle Mike's tools on the same job. And I thought Uncle Mike must be trying to tell me something. So I listened, because I never hear from Uncle Mike. Why am I using both of his tools on the same day? And I heard his voice. He said, he says there's a fire. It's down in the woods. There's a cabin, and people might be trapped. They need your help. And all of a sudden I realized, I think my Uncle Mike was Lassie. Because when I was a kid, I never saw Uncle Mike and Lassie in the same room. So thanks Uncle Mike or Lassie, but I still use this really cool setup a lot. Because when you do the stuff I do every day, little setups like this are cool. So this is, again, for you guys that want to build something like this, 4x4 by 2 inches thick, series of 5/16 18 on one side, 3/8 5/16 18 on one side, 3/8 16 on the other, and you can bolt small parts on these things. I use this more than you would think, but the addition of the EDM holder on the side was a huge hit for me. Well, and then you know what? I have to stop because I don't want to show you everything I have. So there you go. That's tonight's showing of stuff you heard from Uncle Mike, or Lassie, as I like to call him, and more to come next week. So there's a little bit of a trip down memory lane, and I hope you enjoyed looking at that stuff. Taking good notes is always important, really important. And obviously, I don't need those at work anymore. I kind of have it memorized now. But if I ever need those formulas, they're there 40 years later. Taking good notes is an important part of learning. And I see people scribbling and stuff, but take the time to put together a nice notebook, and it becomes kind of like your own machinist handbook, your personal one. I like that. Finally, again, thank you to ISM for the sponsorship. Number 2, if you'd like to be a sponsor here. You know, we're quite reasonable. I think ISM, we got them in under $1 million for sponsorship. I'm sure we can do the same for you. But you know, when you're sponsor segment of the program, it's not just the financial help I appreciate. You know, it's a goodwill thing. People are impressed when they see, wow, my company is an advocate for the trade. Not a bad deal to get your name out there. And finally, as I always say, if you guys like learning more, January will be 8 years since I launched the toolandieguy.com. That's my membership site. And over there's 349. I think I'll do 350 this week. 349 video lessons on machining, tool making, measurement, calibration, all sorts of good stuff over there. So check that out. So again, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm Phil Kerner, the Tool and Die Guy. This has been Tool Room Tuesday.